why writers should craft characters like Spider-Man. Stephen King writes in his 2002 book on writing, "I think the best stories always end up being about the people rather than the event, which is to say, character-driven. Stories are a powerful method to entertain, teach, and inspire people. And characters are absolutely crucial to a story, the protagonist being the most important one. Therefore, it is important that authors form protagonists that readers can identify with and be inspired by. If they write unrelatable characters, audiences will fail to connect with their story. If they write uninspiring characters, then the story may lack hope. Therefore, writers should craft more protagonists like Spider-Man because he is relatable and inspiring. I'm going to show you how he is flawed and heroic, as well as how he learns and grows. As I touch on each of these, we'll look at why those traits are important and contrast the hero from Marvel's most recent set of Spider-Man movies with other characters. First, Spider-Man is flawed. Daniel Schwabauer, the creator of the One-Year Adventure novel program, writes, "We tend to resent people we perceive as being too wonderful, because we simply can't identify with them. Flaws are a crucial element to making a character relatable because the audience is also flawed. Moreover, flaws make characters more realistic. In her 1994 book, Bird by Bird, Anne Lamott discusses Faulkner's characters, saying, "Even though his characters are not necessarily people you want to date, they compel us because we believe that they exist, and we believe that the things they do are true to who they are. This implies that flawed characters are more realistic than perfect characters." At times, Spider-Man acts selfishly and irresponsibly. One example of this is when, in John Watts' film Spider-Man: Homecoming, the title character disobeys his mentor's wishes, having his friend negate the tracker in his suit, and follows the villains by himself, which leads to considerable conflict in the movie. His faulty choices actually help us to connect with him better, because we as the audience are flawed. In contrast, protagonists who are arguably not flawed enough can be difficult for audiences to connect with. Of course, this doesn't mean that all protagonists should be depraved, which brings us to our next point. Spider-Man is heroic. He demonstrates perseverance, courage, selflessness, and compassion. His virtues are what make him heroic. For example, in the Spider-Man: Homecoming film, he demonstrates all of these qualities when he saves his enemy, even though the antagonist had just injured and tried to kill him. In contrast, protagonists who lack heroism for much, if not all of their story, may be disliked by audiences. For example, in Homer's The Iliad, Achilles with his crippling hubris may be harder to root for than Spider-Man with his kindness, and therefore less inspiring. Furthermore, Anne Lamott writes, "As soon as you start protecting your characters from the ramifications of their less than lofty behavior, your story will start to feel flat and pointless. A flat story is hardly inspiring and far from realistic. The poor choices that protagonists make should instigate negative consequences that play out in their story." Finally, Spider-Man learns and grows. He demonstrates to us that people can learn from their mistakes. For example, in Spider-Man: Homecoming, near the end of the film, he tries to reach Happy, one of the adult characters, to warn him about what the villain is going to do. This choice demonstrates learning and growth of character from Spider-Man's rebellion earlier in the film. Similarly, in the sequel movie, Spider-Man: Far From Home, the protagonist calls Happy for help, which leads to Happy providing medical attention and support. Happy helps him to be the best hero that he can be. Spider-Man's willingness to ask for help when it was truly needed and work with others shows a growth of character from who he was earlier on in Spider-Man: Homecoming. In contrast, in Season 1 of Iron Fist, the title character begins as naive, and he never really loses that part of his personality, despite the fact that he is a superhero in his 20s with responsibilities to a major business corporation. As we previously established, it is good for characters to have flaws. However, to reach their full potential as inspiring, protagonists should generally grow and change. The Iron Fist can be considered heroic in some ways, but he fails to meet Spider-Man's level of success with reminding us that we can overcome our flaws and choose to be better. In conclusion, I've studied the art of writing stories and characters for years. A number of sources agree the flaws make characters relatable and realistic. They agree that protagonists should be heroic on some level. They agree that it is a desirable thing to have your protagonist become a better hero as the story goes on. Spider-Man shows flaws and makes mistakes that people can identify with. He demonstrates virtues that people admire. He learns, grows, and can remind us that we can choose to be better versions of ourselves. All of these aspects of the character contribute to my proposal that writers should craft more protagonists like Spider-Man because he is relatable and inspiring.